The elegant ambiance of the upscale downtown restaurant couldn't mask the unease churning within Madeline. Across the table, Adam, her lover, basked in the warmth of their stolen moments, his laughter echoing through the room. Madeline, however, felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach, a premonition that their clandestine affair was about to unravel. Each vibration of her phone sent a jolt of panic through her, a fleeting shadow crossing her face before being quickly replaced with a practiced smile. Adam, oblivious to her inner turmoil, exuded an air of confidence and charm, sipping his wine with the ease of a man who had the world on a string. For Madeline, this affair had always been a dangerous game. Adam was the antithesis of her husband Jack, spontaneous, daring, and unpredictable. He had awakened a dormant passion within her, a spark that had long been extinguished in the predictability of her marriage. Jack, in contrast, was the epitome of stability and kindness, a man she had once loved deeply. But over time, their life together had become a monotonous routine, devoid of excitement and adventure. Now, entangled in this web of deceit, Madeline couldn't even explain to herself why she risked everything for these stolen moments with Adam. The thought of ending it had crossed her mind countless times. Each dinner, each rendezvous with Adam felt like an opportunity to break free, to confess and sever ties. Yet, the words always caught in her throat, and the allure of his presence drew her back in. Tonight, however, felt different. A sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. When her phone buzzed yet again, Madeline's blood ran cold as she glanced at the screen. A new message glared back at her. "Enjoy this evening because it will be over soon." The sender, Jack. Her hands turned clammy, her heart pounding against her ribs. How could Jack possibly know? What did his ominous message imply? The world around her seemed to distort, the lively chatter and clinking glasses fading into a distant hum. Madeline gripped the edge of the table, fighting to maintain her composure. Adam, sensing her distress, leaned closer, his brow creased with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice laced with worry. Madeline forced a weak smile, her voice trembling as she lied. "I'm fine." But she was far from fine. Her world was on the verge of collapse, and she felt powerless to stop it. Adam, unaware of the turmoil raging within her, lifted her hand to his lips, placing a gentle kiss on her trembling fingers. His eyes held hers, searching for answers. Then, with a confident, oblivious grin, he leaned in and kissed her, sealing their fate. For Madeline, the kiss was a chilling reminder of the impending doom, a harbinger of the storm that was about to break. Adam's voice flowed effortlessly, his words blurring into the background for Madeline. She nodded absent-mindedly, but her focus remained on her phone. The chill of Jack's message lingered, a warning that clung to her like a shadow. She didn't know what Jack had planned, but she was certain of one thing. Tonight would not end as she had imagined. It had started about a month ago. Jack had always trusted Madeline, never questioning her late nights or impromptu outings. But one evening, when she returned home after a dinner with friends, something changed. As she leaned in to kiss him goodnight, he caught a faint but unmistakable scent, an expensive men's cologne. It wasn't his. That moment planted a seed of doubt. Jack wasn't the type to act impulsively. He was patient, sharp, and calculating. He didn't accuse her on the spot or demand an explanation. Instead, he began to watch, quietly, methodically. He observed her. Day by day, the changes became clear. Madeline seemed distracted, her eyes flickering to her phone more often than before. She kept it close now, always within reach, never left carelessly on the counter or nightstand. Sometimes, she would smile softly at the screen, a private moment that made Jack's stomach tighten with unease. It was all he needed to confirm what he already suspected. Madeline, caught up in the thrill of her affair, didn't notice how sloppy she had become. She thought she was clever, that her secret life was hidden beneath layers of deception. But Jack saw through it all. And he wasn't simply biding his time out of hurt or confusion. He was planning. Every smile, every casual question, every kind gesture he showed her was deliberate. It masked the storm brewing inside him. Jack wasn't the kind of man to explode in anger. No, his strength lay in his patience. He was waiting for the perfect moment, the point at which Madeline would be so deep in her lies that she wouldn't see the trap closing in. Madeline's phone buzzed again, jolting her out of her thoughts. Her heart leapt into her throat as her trembling hands reached for the screen. "Now, do you really think no one will find out about this?" Another message from Jack. Her stomach twisted violently, the words blurring before her eyes as panic gripped her. She forced herself to remain still, clutching the phone as if it were a lifeline. But the tension was impossible to ignore. The soft glow of the upscale restaurant felt suffocating, its ambiance now a trap she couldn't escape. She couldn't just stand up and leave. Not here. Not in the middle of a place where every move could be scrutinized by watchful eyes. Yet the growing anxiety felt unbearable, creeping up her spine like a cold, unrelenting shadow. Across the table, Adam noticed her unease. "Maddie," he asked softly, his brow furrowing. "You sure you're okay?" Madeline forced a smile, her voice trembling. "I'm fine." She lied. But she wasn't fine. She was caught in the crosshairs of Jack's quiet vengeance, and she had no idea what would happen next. Madeline couldn't escape the sense of impending doom. The walls of the restaurant seemed to close in on her, the once cozy ambiance now suffocating. Across from her, Adam's voice was a dull hum, his words slipping past her without meaning as her mind raced. Her eyes darted around the room, scanning the other diners. Some were chatting, others absorbed in their meals. It all looked so normal, yet something was profoundly wrong. She could feel it in her gut. She glanced toward a table a few feet away and froze. Her pulse roared in her ears as her gaze locked onto a group of familiar faces. Sitting there, their expressions stern and unyielding, were her relatives, her uncle, her cousin with his wife, and her younger sister. Their eyes bore into her, heavy with silent condemnation. Not a word was spoken, but their expressions said everything. They knew. Madeline's hands began to tremble, and the room seemed to blur. The weight of their judgment pressed down on her chest, making it nearly impossible to breathe. She knew her family's values well, strict, conservative, and unyielding in their morality. Betrayal wasn't just a mistake to them, it was an unforgivable sin. Her secret life, so carefully constructed, was unraveling before her eyes. The air grew thick as her mind spiraled into panic. One by one, her family members rose from their seats. They didn't say a word as they gathered their belongings, their expressions still fixed on her, heavy with disappointment. Madeline watched in horror as they turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving her drowning in their silent judgment. Her thoughts spun wildly. Jack, he must have done this. He knew all along, and now, he had ensured that her family knew, too. A few days earlier, Jack had met with her relatives in private, calm and composed. He had presented them with the evidence he had meticulously gathered, photos, messages, and every incriminating detail of her betrayal. At first, they were in shock, reluctant to believe what they were seeing. But Jack was steady and unwavering. He told them not to intervene, not to confront her directly. "Just watch," he had said. "Let her choices unravel her own life." They agreed, their faces heavy with disappointment, and now they had come to witness her downfall. Madeline sat frozen in her chair, her composure crumbling. The restaurant, once warm and inviting, now seemed darker, the air heavier. She felt as if every other diner could see her guilt etched across her face, Across the table, Adam finally noticed her distress. His brow furrowed as he leaned closer. "Maddie," he said softly, his voice edged with concern. "What's going on? You're shaking. Are you okay?" Madeline forced herself to meet his gaze, but her trembling hands betrayed her. I'm fine," she stammered, the words feeling hollow. But she wasn't fine. Her carefully hidden secret was unraveling faster than she could comprehend, and she had no idea how to stop the storm that Jack had unleashed. A strange smile played on Madeline's lips, barely concealing the turmoil brewing within her, the weight of her secrets, the condemning glares from her family, and the cryptic messages from Jack threatened to crush her. How could she possibly explain this to Adam, the man who sat across from her, oblivious to the storm raging inside her? Panic clawed at her throat, but she fought to maintain her composure. "I love you, Maddie." Adam's voice, filled with warmth and sincerity, broke through the tension. He reached across the table, his hand enveloping hers in a firm, reassuring grip. "If something's bothering you, we'll face it together. I'm not going anywhere. Let's leave this place. Find somewhere private. Just the two of us." Madeline's heart ached with a mixture of longing and guilt. For a fleeting moment, she yearned to escape with him, to leave behind the suffocating web of deceit, but the words caught in her throat, trapped by fear and the uncertainty of the future. Just as she was about to respond, a faint buzz from Adam's phone shattered the moment. He glanced at the screen, and in an instant, his demeanor transformed. The color drained from his face, his confident smile replaced with an expression Madeline had never seen before: fear. Without a word, Adam rose from his chair, his movements hurried and frantic. He grabbed his wallet, hastily counting out enough cash to cover their bill. "Adam, what's happening? Did something happen?" Madeline's voice trembled with confusion and a growing sense of dread. He remained silent, avoiding her gaze. His actions spoke volumes, each one filled with urgency and a desperate need to escape. "Adam, please talk to me," and she pleaded, reaching for his arm, desperate for an explanation. "Let me come with you." He stopped abruptly, his hand shooting up to halt her advance. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, distant, a stranger's voice. "No, I have urgent matters to attend to," he said flatly, his eyes filled with a chilling detachment. This could take a while. Madeline's heart sank. This wasn't the Adam she knew, the man she had fallen for. His sudden distance felt like a physical blow, leaving her reeling in shock. As he turned to leave, Madeline caught a glimpse of his phone screen before it went dark. A message from another woman, the name obscured, flashed before her eyes. "Adam, please!" she cried out, her voice cracking with despair. But he didn't turn back. He paused only to give her one last look, a stern, unforgiving expression that sent shivers down her spine. "Goodbye, Maddie," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper, and then he was gone, leaving her alone in the suffocating silence. Madeline sat frozen, her mind reeling from the sudden turn of events. The man she had risked everything for had walked away, leaving her with nothing but the shattered remnants of her choices. The weight of her secrets, once a burden shared, now pressed down on her with renewed force, threatening to consume her entirely. The realization hit Madeline like a bolt of lightning. Adam, the man she thought she knew, the man she had fallen for, had been living a lie. He wasn't the free-spirited, unattached individual he portrayed himself to be. He had a wife, a life he had kept hidden from her, a secret that shattered the illusion of their connection. The truth, like a puzzle piecing itself together, revealed a calculated deception. Jack, her husband, the epitome of patience and methodical planning, had been aware of Adam's double life long before Madeline ever suspected. Adam wasn't just seeking a fleeting affair. He was entangled in a web of marriage, business dealings, and shared properties, a life too complex to easily dismantle. Instead of seeking a divorce, he sought solace in mistresses, indulging his desires while maintaining his carefully constructed facade. Days before the fateful dinner, Jack, with his characteristic calm and strategic mind, had uncovered Adam's secret and discreetly revealed it to his wife. He had set the stage for Adam's downfall, orchestrating his exposure with precision. Now, the consequences of Adam's deceit were crashing down around him. Madeline sat alone at the restaurant table, the fragments of her shattered dreams scattered before her. Adam wasn't coming back. He wasn't going to offer comfort or solace. He had vanished from her life as abruptly as he had left the restaurant, leaving her to face the wreckage alone. Her phone vibrated, breaking the silence that enveloped her. Tears welled up in her eyes, threatening to spill over. Her family had abandoned her. Adam had disappeared. And now, she was utterly alone. A message from Jack flashed across the screen. "Don't go home. Madeline, you don't have a home anymore." Panic surged through her heart pounding in her chest. The room spun around her as she hastily stood, nearly upsetting her chair. She had to salvage the situation, to find a way to mend the shattered pieces of her life. Madeline rushed out of the restaurant, her breath coming in ragged gasps, fumbling with her keys. She slid into her car, her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel. The engine roared to life, and she sped towards their apartment, desperation propelling her forward. The drive felt interminable, her mind a whirlwind of disbelief and fear. He couldn't possibly mean it, she murmured to herself. He wouldn't simply cast me aside, would he? She clung to the faint hope that she could reason with Jack, explain her actions, and plead for his understanding. But deep down, she knew the truth. He had been meticulously planning this, waiting for the opportune moment to execute his plan. A wave of nausea washed over Madeline as she arrived at the apartment. The door opened effortlessly, but the warmth that usually greeted her was absent. The place felt cold and alien, devoid of the familiarity she once cherished. Her footsteps echoed in the empty space, her gaze drawn to the sight that awaited her in the living room. Several neatly packed cardboard boxes occupied the center of the room. Her belongings, clothes, shoes, books, everything that represented her life with Jack had been reduced to these impersonal containers. On the coffee table lay 2 stacks of papers. One was a set of divorce papers, crisp and ready for her signature. The other was a torn copy of their lease, a stark reminder that she no longer had a place in this home. Madeline's breath hitched in her throat, her chest constricting with a painful tightness. Tears blurred her vision as the reality of her situation crashed down upon her. This wasn't just a disagreement or a reprimand, it was the end of her marriage. The end of the life she had so desperately tried to maintain. Her world, the one she had meticulously balanced between 2 lives, had finally and irrevocably crumbled. The lease was terminated. Signed by Jack, Madeline had until tomorrow to vacate the premises. Tears welled in her eyes, the reality of her situation crashing down with the force of a tidal wave. Her body trembled as sobs racked her frame. Collapsing onto the floor, clutching the divorce papers, her life, as she knew it, was over, systematically dismantled with chilling precision. Jack had orchestrated it all. The apartment had always been in his name, a detail Madeline had overlooked, never imagining it would become a weapon used against her. Now, it granted him the power to sever their shared life completely. While Madeline dined with Adam, clinging to the illusion of normalcy, Jack had been busy. He had efficiently packed her belongings into neat, impersonal boxes, placing them strategically where she couldn't miss them. The signed divorce papers lay beside the torn-up lease, a clear and final message. Her time here was over. There were no heated arguments, no dramatic confrontations. Jack didn't desire a scene. He wanted her to fully grasp the consequences of her actions, to witness the ruins of what she had destroyed when it was already too late. Madeline sat on the cold, hard floor, tears streaming down her face, her sobs echoing through the desolate apartment. The space, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt like a hollow shell, a tomb of lost memories. Her phone buzzed, shattering the heavy silence. Her hand trembled as she reached for it. A final message from Jack flashing across the screen. "You've made your choice." The phone slipped from her grasp. Fresh waves of anguish washing over her, she lay sprawled on the floor, the weight of her loss crushing her spirit. The boxes of her belongings mocked her, cruel reminders of a life she had taken for granted, a life now irrevocably lost. In a desperate haze, Madeline grabbed her phone again. Her trembling fingers hovered over Jack's contact before she pressed call. The phone rang, each unanswered tone piercing the silence of the empty apartment, each one a sharp stab to her heart. But there was no answer. Jack wasn't going to pick up. Memories flooded her mind, dreams of a future together, a life they had planned to build. In 3 months, they were supposed to close on a house, a new beginning away from the city. They had even whispered about starting a family, picturing the patter of tiny feet and the laughter of children filling their home. Dreams, plans, a future woven with love and hope. Now, shattered, destroyed by a reckless affair. Madeline's sobs intensified, her tears soaking the divorce papers. She hadn't truly wanted to lose Jack. She had deluded herself into believing she could have it all, that her double life could remain hidden. But Jack had seen through her deception, and now she was left to face the consequences of her choices, utterly alone. The future they envisioned lying in ruins around her. Madeline never intended to lose it all. Her desire was simple, to reawaken the dormant embers of her soul, to chase the thrill of a forbidden excitement. She believed it would be a harmless escapade, a fleeting indulgence concealed in the shadows, a secret that would never see the light of day. But now, those shadows had engulfed her, leaving her life shattered and in ruins. Desperate, her thoughts turned to Adam. Perhaps he can help me, she thought, clinging to a sliver of hope. Maybe he can explain everything to Jack. With trembling fingers, she dialed his number, her breath catching in her throat with each ring. But the line remained eerily silent. No voice, no voicemail, not even a dial tone. Confused and alarmed, she tried again, only to be met with the same cold, unresponsive silence. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Adam had blocked her. Madeline's heart plummeted, the weight of abandonment pressing down on her with renewed force. He had severed all ties, retreating back into the shadows where their affair had once flourished, leaving her stranded and alone. Her mind raced with questions, each one a sharp jab of pain. Did I mean nothing to him? Was I just another temporary distraction? Another means of escape? Just like he was for me? The thought was unbearable, igniting a furious rage within her, a bitter resentment directed at the world, at Adam, at Jack, but most of all, at herself. She sprang to her feet, kicking the nearest box with a vengeance, sending it tumbling across the room. She punched another, its contents spilling across the floor in a chaotic mess. Clothes, books, and trinkets from her life with Jack lay scattered, mirroring the shattered fragments of her soul. A scream tore from her throat, a raw, primal sound filled with anguish and despair. She kicked and punched, her body moving on pure instinct, until her legs ached and her breath came in ragged gasps, her fury momentarily eclipsing the pain. 20 minutes later, the storm of rage subsided, leaving Madeline exhausted and hollow. She collapsed amidst the chaos she had created, tears streaming down her face as she struggled to catch her breath. The weight of her choices pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. She felt utterly alone, with nowhere to turn, no one to offer solace. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone again, her mind desperately seeking a lifeline. this time. She dialed her uncle's number. He answered on the second ring, his voice grave and laced with disapproval. The silence that followed was thick with tension. The memory of his cold, condemning stare at the restaurant flashing before her eyes. "Uncle," Madeline whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of her tears. "I need your help." His response was harsh, devoid of any sympathy. "Madeline," he said, his words cutting deep. "You've made a grave mistake. You've brought shame upon this family." Her chest constricted, a sob rising in her throat. "Please," she pleaded, tears flowing freely now. "I don't know what to do." But his silence was deafening, a clear indication of his judgment. In that moment, Madeline realized the full extent of her isolation, the depths of her despair. She had fallen further than she ever imagined, and she was utterly alone. "I'm so sorry," Madeline sobbed into the phone. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I need you." Her uncle's sigh came through the line, heavy with disappointment. "I promised your father, Maddie. I promised him I'd look after you. But you didn't just betray Jack. You betrayed all of us. Your father, your family. You've put us all in an incredibly difficult position." Madeline clutched the phone tighter, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "I never wanted this." For a long moment, her uncle said nothing. The silence was deafening, and Madeline's heart felt like it might shatter under the weight of his condemnation. Then, with a deep sigh, his tone softened slightly. "Family doesn't abandon its own," he said. "I won't leave you, Maddie, but you need to understand. You'll have to atone for this. It's not going to be easy. Things between us won't be the same, not until you've made this right." Madeline's heart broke all over again, shame burning through her as his words sank in. But amidst the overwhelming guilt, there was a faint glimmer of relief. At least she wasn't completely alone. "Thank you, Uncle," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't thank me yet," he replied firmly. "There's a long road ahead. You'll have to earn back our trust." The call ended, leaving Madeline once again surrounded by silence. She let the phone slip from her hand, her body limp and heavy with despair. She couldn't bring herself to move. The weight of everything she had lost, her marriage, her lover, her family's respect, pressed down on her like a crushing force. All she could do was lie there, curled up on the cold floor, as the darkness of the night enveloped her completely. Hours passed, but Madeline didn't care. She stayed still and broken. Her tears dried, but her spirit shattered. It wasn't until the first light of morning crept through the window, casting pale shadows on the walls of the empty apartment, that she stirred. The new day brought no solace, only a stark reminder of the long, lonely road she would have to walk to rebuild her life. If you found this story interesting and dramatic, please subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and explore many more compelling cheating stories on my channel. Wishing you the best of luck.